ever wondered how Olympic weightlifters train? You might have seen some of your favorite role models train on YouTube, and you might be a beginner level athlete and you're wondering, should I be training the same? Guys, Mona here. Welcome to my channel where I talk about all things mindset and weightlifting. And I think today's topic is really interesting because a lot of people will just mimic their favorite weightlifters or role models that they see on YouTube or on Instagram, and they will just do the lifting that they do and think that they are going to make the gains that they do. And today I'm going to be telling you that this is not the case and how training programs differ from an elite level athlete to an intermediate athlete to even a beginner level athlete. Before we go into the topic of how weightlifters train, I'd love to know in the comments below if you are a weightlifter and letting us know how many sessions a week do you do, and if you are not an elite level or intermediate level athlete and maybe you're thinking to start the sport, have you ever wondered how weightlifters train? Or maybe you have burning questions that you want to know about how programming works for weightlifters. Please comment below. I'd love to answer those. Now, when it comes to how weightlifters train, you have to also realize not all level or elite level athletes train the same. It depends on your club where you're at or on a training camp. It depends on your training age. How long have you been in the sport? Do you have any injuries? Maybe you've been in the sport for, like myself, I've been in the sport for over 20 years. So my training now looks a whole lot different to what it did when I was 16, 17 years old, training in training camps, doing sometimes up to 3 sessions a day. Majority of the time I would do 2 sessions on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, and on Tuesday, Thursdays, Saturdays I would do 1 session. My body was a lot more resilient. I could bounce back a lot easier. My recovery was a lot quicker, but because I've been now in the sport for so long, my recovery is a lot slower. And obviously with my training age, I have to take those things into consideration. So now I have to train smart instead of just hard. Now, when it comes to a beginner level weightlifter, if you are new to the sport, maybe you've been doing it for a little while in CrossFit and you want to start competing, or maybe you haven't done weightlifting at all and you really are just so interested to have a barbell in your hand and lift some weight. Now, when it comes to beginner level athletes, what I do recommend is not focus firstly on how much you can lift, but knowing that your foundation is key. You need to emphasize technique, technique, technique. This will feel monotonous, it will get boring, but if you want to improve in the sport of weightlifting, you have to firstly fix your technique, get that under your belt before you start thinking about adding weight to the barbell. Now, what I recommend session-wise for beginner level athlete, I would always say between 3 and 5 sessions a week is optimal. You can even still see great improvements with just 3 sessions a week because you've never done the sport before, you've never had that stimuli of doing Olympic weightlifting, so it will be quite a big shock to the system. And again, doing more isn't always better. Again, you can get away with even 3 sessions a week. Master that technique. That should be your number one focus when starting the sport of weightlifting. So if you've never done the sport, I would firstly recommend finding a coach or a club, somewhere where you can join and not just teach yourself off YouTube or from a book, because you could be missing essential cues and even make certain technique errors that if you don't fix them from a really early stage, they will start to impact your lifting later on. And if you've been doing the bad technique for a year or 2 years, it's going to take a super long time to relearn the good technique and changing those movement patterns. So you want to make sure that your movement patterns are correct from the beginning. That's what's key. Now, when it comes to an intermediate level athlete, you could also get away with training 3 to 5 times a week. Depends on your goal, depends on your age, depends on your mobility, if you've got injuries, if you do other sport. Maybe you are a CrossFit athlete and you want to start competing in the sport of weightlifting. Doing firstly weightlifting with CrossFit already, it will be a lot for your body to handle. So it's very important to make sure that you don't burn out by doing too much weightlifting and too much CrossFit, because at the end of the day, it's going to be detrimental to your body and you'll probably end up injuring yourself. So again, if you are a CrossFit athlete and you want to start the sport of weightlifting, reduce your CrossFit training a bit and put a bit more emphasis into your weightlifting training so that you go into each session fresh. Now, maybe you are an intermediate athlete and you really want to become an elite level athlete. You want to compete at a high level. Firstly, consistency is key. You also need to make sure that even if you start training really hard and you start adding extra sessions to your training program, again, you want to make sure you are smart about training. So that's why following a training program, having a coach is so important. And then secondly, you want to make sure that recovery is also just as important, because you don't grow when you are constantly pushing your body and breaking your muscle down. You need to make sure that when you are not on that platform lifting, you're focusing on recovery. So that's why you must also realize that when you are an elite level athletes, this is their be all and end all. This is their careers. A lot of them don't do anything else but lift. So again, they don't have to do a job where they go and work from 9 to 5. Yes, there are elite level athletes that do that, but their training load will be reduced and not be as hectic as the athlete who can train twice a day. And if they're not training, they will be going for a massage, going to a physio, doing ice bathing, doing sauna, focusing on their nutrition, focusing on their sleep, going outside, seeing sunshine, walking, doing all those kind of things, because they have the time and the resources in order to focus on their recovery to make sure that every single session is optimal. If you are a very stressed person, you, again, like I was saying earlier, you might be a student, you might be studying, you might be in school, you might be working a 9 to 5 job, have a family. You need to realize that, in all honesty, doing 2 sessions a day, yes, it is possible, but you will be breaking yourself down a lot more and your recovery will probably be a lot slower, and you'll probably find that you won't make as many gains as what you would if you actually had to just train smarter instead of harder. So just remember, going the route of training harder isn't always the answer to improving in the sport of weightlifting. Now let's quickly cover how many hours a day should a weightlifter train. If you are a beginner level athlete, I wouldn't recommend you training for more than an hour and a half or even 2 hours a session, and that includes your warm-up, your mobility, your cool-down, whatever you might be doing, because at the end, the skill is so important. So again, it's better to go into your training session being fresh, being ready, being recovered, and just doing a quality training session instead of just getting in quantity. If you are an intermediate level athlete, your sessions might be a little bit longer. You might be training anything between 1.5 hours or 2.5 hours. Again, that just depends on how much time you have, the level of athlete you are, what are your competition goals, what are your goals in general. And again, you don't need to do a 3 or 4 hour session in order to improve. I promise you that you will be able to improve and still make gains by doing a shorter session. At the end of the day, quality is more important. When you go into your training session, one thing that I always emphasize on is making sure to move properly, you need to be nice and warm. But you don't need to do an hour of mobility prior to your weightlifting session. It's just important to make sure that whatever your goal of that day is, you move properly for that. If you're an athlete that does need a bit more work when it comes to doing mobility and getting yourself warm, then yes, spend a bit more time doing that. But you do not want to spend an hour and a half doing mobility, and then when you get to your weightlifting session, you will be tired and fatigued. Now, if you are an advanced level athlete, you might actually see, like, some of the athletes might go in, talk a bit with their teammates, and then the training will start. So training might look like it's really long, but weightlifting training is actually not that long. You'll often see that the training itself will be, like I said, maximum 1.5 hours to maybe 2 hours max, and the rest of the time it's either resting, talking to your teammates, recovering, doing some mobility, doing some cool down exercises, and that is how weightlifters train. And just also remember, all coaches have their own philosophies, their own tricks up their sleeves, their own way of doing things, their own little tricks that they put into their program, something that maybe they've done for many years and they've seen it work. So just remember that all training programs and all coaches aren't going to be the same. So find a coach that works for you, find a coach that's a good fit for you, a club that's a good fit for you. Even if it's online, make sure that you guys have a good relationship. Make sure you can talk to the coach, communicate certain things, because at the end of the day, in order for you to improve, you and the coach needs to have a really good understanding of where you are at, where you want to be, how you move, if you've got previous injuries, certain things that you need to work on, because those things are very important in order to make progress in the sport of weightlifting. So now, if you've been that athlete who has been looking at athletes on YouTube or on Instagram and you want to take your game to the next level, you can go and click on the link below and you can go and try out a 7-day free trial of my weightlifting program that is 3 days a week or 5 days a week, depending on what you want and depending on what your goal is. And if you have any questions regarding which program will be best for you, please don't hesitate, send me a message. I'd love to answer you. I'd love to guide you into choosing the right training program for you. And also, if you are a beginner level athlete, we have a beginner level weightlifting program as well as a weightlifting mastery course for you to learn how to master the skills in Olympic weightlifting. Guys, if you like this video and it was helpful, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, ring that notification bell, and I will see you in the next one.